All right, ladies and gentlemen around the Delaware Valley, welcome to the Legal and Labor Show here on WWDB Talk 860. We're brought to you by Soloff and Zervanos. We've got a fantastic broadcast. Today is actually a healthcare special. We have our host, John Zervanos, on the broadcast. John, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thank you, Joe.
It's great to have you here. And of course, our guest, Representative Tarik Khan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. How are you? How are you?
Office, and we appreciate you joining us for the broadcast today. And so, as we start, and John Zervanos, after our last broadcast, your last segment on the show, he was adamant about wanting to do a full show, obviously on healthcare in Pennsylvania, the challenges, and a lot of the things that you're doing. As a state rep in Harrisburg. And let me first, if you will, I'm going to introduce you, Pennsylvania State Representative Tarik Khan, Democrat, serving the 194th district in Philadelphia County. Certainly, Tarik is no stranger to the broadcast. If you would, where 194th district, where is that, if you will, Tarik?
Yeah, so it's Northwest Philly. So it's East Falls, Manayunk, Roxborough, Chestnut Hill, Wissahickon.
Okay, fantastic. Which one do you like better?
Oh, man.
I'm an East Falls guy. That's why I said that.
Just kidding. I spent a lot of time at St. Bridget's. I'm actually doing the sandwich mission. So it's every Saturday morning. I've been there for the last month, every Saturday, working with Father Jim and all the volunteers, making sandwiches for an hour for people with food insecurity in Philly.
Awesome. And I'm a graduate of St. Bridget's.
Oh, no way.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm a Fallser. I'm in East Falls right now. I live 2 doors down from the house I grew up in. My father was the president of the East Falls Sports Association. So you're talking to, there's a lot of people who move to East Falls, and then there's the Fallsers.
I was actually thinking, the song by Billy Joel, New York State of Mind?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about doing it East Falls State of Mind, right? Yeah. Don't care if it's McMichael Park or on Sunnyside.
Well, it's funny you say that. By the way, not a bad voice. But, John, this show's taking a turn for, I know you didn't expect, but here's the funny thing. John, let me just say this. And by the way, it's a very diverse neighborhood. Ed Rendell lived here, our inspector.
Yep.
Very affluent people. And then
Grace Kelly.
Right, Grace Kelly. That's who we roll with around here. Okay?
That's right.
And then there's me. Okay, so you can see the range. But here's a funny thing before we get into the law and start talking about the great things that you're doing in healthcare in Harrisburg. In East Falls, if you're a real Fallser, you've heard of people around the world who think the world is flat. Well, in East Falls, if you're a real Fallser, there really is no world beyond Scotts Lane, Schoolhouse Lane, Henry Ave, and Ridge Ave. So you can
do a lot. You can do a lot. I mean, there's health. I mean, unfortunately, we used to have a hospital where unfortunately they closed that down. But there's food. There is healthcare. I mean, Abbotsford Falls is basically in the footprint of East Falls, the shadow of East Falls. And just some of the best places to live in the city is.
Okay. By the way, I'm just, I was just kidding about the but if you're a real Fallser in Roxborough, Manayunker, okay, somebody says I live in East Falls, they'll say, if you're a real Falls, they'll say you're from Manayunker. I'm like, no, I'm not. By the way, that's who you represent. I just want you to. Anyway, listen, guys. An awesome show, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. A healthcare special broadcast, the importance, I believe, of having somebody in Harrisburg like Representative Khan, who's a seasoned healthcare professional and who understands the healthcare system, understands what it means to be a healthcare professional and the needs of the patients. Okay, if you will, Representative Khan, remind our listeners about your pathway to public service, including your career as a healthcare professional.
Yeah, it started in the Philadelphia public schools. I mean, went to Greenberg, and then I went to Central after that. So I got my start in Philly, went to Davidson in North Carolina for college, came back after a couple years in LA, came back, went to Roxborough Hospital School of Nursing, and became an RN. And really, that's where I fell in love with the area. I kept kind of pursuing the nursing track. I got my nurse practitioner at LaSalle, and then I kept going and became president of the Pennsylvania State Nurses Association and got my PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm also and I have a PhD in nursing research from Penn, and I've been a nurse for 2 decades. So, and I currently work now actually as a nurse practitioner at Abbotsford Falls Health Center in Northwest Philly.
Wow, I was unaware of that. But
Yeah.
the first thing that came to mind was when you say I'm going to do something about something at the hospital, you actually can do it. And so,
Yes.
But getting into leadership, okay. So you were the president of, what was the name of your?
Yep. Pennsylvania State Nurses Association.
Okay. So you've been, obviously in leadership roles, for a long time. And a lot of the conversation the things that we're going to talk about have a lot to do with things that impact people on a healthcare level across the board. John, I'm going to start this conversation. I'll ask the question, but this is your area and you're really, really passionate about this. So when we talk about the healthcare topics, we're talking about we're going to talk about three particular things. We're talking about the protecting hospital workers from workplace violence.
Oh, yeah.
That bill, before we get into it, we're also going to talk about the Patient Safety Act. You have co-sponsored or sponsored every one of these bills. And then the modernization of professional nursing law. As a healthcare professional at a very high level, did your experience in that area in your medical career inspire you to get into public service, number one, and then when you got into public service, like right away, you're going to try to, make a difference in the system, Tarik, if you will.
Absolutely. We talked a little bit about healthcare in East Falls. I mean, we used to have Women's Medical MCP, and then Tenet bought it for profit, and not. I think it was about 6 weeks after a nursing strike, they shut the place down.
Yeah, and that's a problem. By the way, I was born at Women's Medical Hospital. So, but it's the same. You look at what happened downtown. Okay, to Hahnemann. Yeah, and when you got and you have hedge funds and people who care more about profits than patients. Now that it explains a lot, but there's a lot of frustrations. John, let's start off talking about the well, where do you want to go? Do you want to, so we have the Patient Safety Act.
What I'd like to do is, what made me so enthusiastic to invite Representative Khan back to our program was obviously his experience, but also his sponsorship of the Patient Safety Act. And one of my concerns, both as a citizen of Pennsylvania as well as an attorney, was and I think this is something, and I'm speaking on behalf of most, if not all, our listeners, is when you show up at the emergency room, especially in Philadelphia and everywhere else. Frankly, I've got clients in places like Lancaster and Reading and Allentown who all have the same complaint. You show up at the emergency room and you wait and you wait and you wait, and some of these folks leave. And what I learned in asking a lot of questions, either because I was there for a family member or professionally, is that it's not so much that there's not enough room at the inn. It's that there's not enough people staffing the inn so that you can have patients being seen by qualified professionals to evaluate them and give them a diagnosis and then treat those individuals. And the concern that I have, and I think I'm speaking for Pennsylvania in general, is how can we fix this problem? And in talking to Representative Khan, I had found that it's a fixable problem, but we have some folks that are standing in our way. And with that in mind, I think I'd like to have him comment on that so we can discuss it.
Yeah, thanks, John. You know, it was my work as a nurse that really guided my advocacy as a president of the Nurses Association, being on the board, and now as a state rep. I worked with the nursing unions on the safe staffing bill. We actually wrote it together. PASNAP wrote it, and then worked on it with SEIU, and we introduced it together with Pennsylvania State Nurses Association, which is sort of not affiliated with anything. It has nurses that are union, nurses that are not in a union. It's sort of the American Nurses Association umbrella. They had never had it, to my understanding, they had never had a state agency like PSNA combine forces with the union on one staffing bill. They had different bills, right? Different. It didn't make any sense. You know, when you go to legislators and you said I have two bills on something on the same thing, they're going to tell you I can maybe pass one, but I can't pass two. And in fact, the two bills were blocking each other because they're like, well, we're not going to do anything until you guys figure this out amongst yourselves. So we got together on one safe staffing bill that was rooted in research, and that's also where my PhD comes in. When I was at the University of Pennsylvania, Penn had been the leaders of safe staffing research. And my advisor, Matt McHugh, he actually wrote a lot of that research on safe staffing. And what we know in the research is that safe minimum patient staffing standards are based in the literature. So if you have the appropriate amount of nurses for patients, less patients die. I mean, it's that cut and dry. If Pennsylvania, I think I mentioned this in the last show, but if Pennsylvania had the same staffing standards as California does, we would save 3 patients a day in Pennsylvania. That's how important it is, because nurses can't do their job. And nurses, they're sort of like, nurses' job is to be the assessor. They're the ones that are, it's sort of like they're the ones that are monitoring the situation. You know, physicians, they order the medication, to the nurse practitioners, they order the medications, they order the lab tests. The nurse is there to make sure that to monitor how the patient is responding and to take care of the patient. And if you give the nurse too many patients, they can't catch what's going on. It's like, you know, putting one outfielder for the Phillies instead of having left field, center field, and right field. You're going to start dropping balls. You know, you can't have one outfielder. You have to have 3.
That's a great example. My question to you is two, actually. One, in the 50 states, you use California as an example, but our next door neighbors, New Jersey, we got Delaware, Maryland, New York. Are these states, do they have statutes in place that require staffing certain amount of nurses available to ERs when they're open for business?
You know, the sad thing is, John, no, they don't. And the reason why is the power of the medical, the doctors, in Pennsylvania it's called PA Medical Association, who are not bad people, but they're advocating for a bad policy, which is that I'm sorry. That's the other one. I'm sorry. The American Hospital Association. Sorry, but I'm not going to let them off the hook. I'm not going to let them off the hook because they got the wrong thing on the nurse full practice authority, but it's a hospital association, because the hospitals don't want to be told what to do. So the American Hospital Association has successfully blocked this bill from being passed in states all across the country. Massachusetts was a big example. I mean, we thought that bill would have been passed, and it was blocked by the hospital association. And it's a shame because it's penny wise, pound foolish. It's not all hospitals. We got to give props where it's due. University of Pennsylvania has been amazing on this. Their CEO, Chief Medical Officer Kevin Mahoney, he came out in favor of safe staffing standards because he knows that there might be an initial cost because you're hiring more nurses. But guess what? Those nurses are more likely to stay, so you don't have to pay to hire a new nurse, which when I started was about $60,000 just to train a nurse 20 years ago. And patients are less likely to die.
It's interesting you said that, because a couple years ago, one of my daughters was admitted to the hospital, and I remember the wait that we experienced. And by the time we got upstairs to the patient floor when she was admitted onto the floor, in my frustration, I had shared with the nurse on the floor. I said, I just don't understand it. It seems like it's worse than it's ever been. And she told me something very interesting. She said that the ER is like a war zone, and that the nurses, they try to pull nurses down from the floors or even ask them to put in hours in the ER. And a lot of nurses just don't want to do it because of the sheer pressure and the volume and the stress associated with attending to so many patients at once without enough help. They just don't want that kind of exposure. So they say, no, I'm not going down there. And I think what you're saying is if there's more nurses there to staff ERs, you're not going to have nurses say, no, I don't want to do a rotation in the ER because it's too hazardous for my health, my mental health. They'll all go down there because they know they have enough help there that they can give the kind of care they want to give to patients. Correct? I'm sorry.
It's exactly right.
Cross-examination.
You may, I remember when I was starting out as a nurse, and I looked at my paycheck, and my friend, who I won't mention who they were or what law firm they worked at, but they were making twice what I was making, right? And so I was thinking, wow, that must be a really great job. Turns out I worked 40 hours a week. They worked 80 hours a week. So like if I wanted more, like if I wanted to do the job of two people, like you would have to pay me double the amount, but I wouldn't even want to do that, because it doesn't make sense. So we're asking nurses and saying, well, we'll pay you a little bit more money. No one wants to do it because you get burned out. You can't do it. These nurses are getting burned out and they're making mistakes. And when you make a mistake, I used to work as a barista at a coffee shop. When you're understaffed, people don't get their coffee, they get mad. At a coffee shop, when you're understaffed at a hospital, people die. And it's just unconscionable that we wouldn't do what we know works. Yeah.
And there's so many repercussions to that because you just hit the nail on the head. When a barista makes a mistake, the coffee's not right, you pour another cup of coffee, you make another cup of coffee. No harm, no foul. It was a $4 mistake or whatever they're charging for coffee at some of these places. I mean, but if you make a mistake at a nurse, and there's so much pressure, there's so many pressures on nurses because they also act like almost triage agents. Even after the patient's been triaged, now they're in the hospital, in the ER, and the nurse is the one attending to them because there's only usually one or two ER doctors there anyway. So they're under the pressure to identify the acuity of each patient so that if they need a doctor in there right away, they have to make that call. And what just really surprises me is if you're a risk manager at a hospital,
right.
Why wouldn't you push for legislation that would protect hospitals from malpractice cases? Because it's a kind of a win-win for everybody.
It is a win-win. It makes sense. Yeah.
So why are the hospital association standing in your way when it's a win-win?
Let me jump in there because you guys were talking about some interesting stuff. In some ways, it's funny because I'm not obviously an expert in healthcare, especially emergency rooms, but obviously, I understand what's going on, and we've talked to many. Listen, there have been labor shortages and picket lines outside of some hospitals because of staffing shortages, and ultimately speaking, the patient is what pays, the price. And like I said, it reminds me in a very, very different manner. Okay, of this sounds, but imagine. So I was in the nightlife business. Okay, believe it or not, we owned a nightclub down in Center City for 15 years, and you would have a situation where you have a staff and you have partners, and you're sitting around in a meeting, and the guys, and maybe it was me that figured, you know what, that back room is not open. We don't need a guard to watch the door. Okay. And then, so we're penny wise and dollar stupid. and we don't know, and then eventually somebody gets in, okay, and then somebody gets hurt. Now,
Yep.
okay, so you're saving money in one point, okay, with understaffing, okay, and like John said, and you as well, Tarik. Now you have a situation where you're liable. You're open, especially when you. I've heard. In fact, I have a good friend of mine who used to work for L&I who died in the emergency room. I don't know what hospital offhand, but I think it was upstate Pennsylvania. But they were understaffed. He died waiting, and so
It's horrible.
is that an analogy on a much?
Yeah, no.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It's really sad. And I'm sorry to hear about your friend. I have to say, I had a similar situation. Being a nurse, I'm one of three healthcare providers. We have Bridget Kozorowski, Arvind Venkat. One of my patients last session had to go to the emergency room. He thought, he was having some symptoms that we were concerned about. Went to the emergency room. While we got to the emergency room, we're in Pittsburgh. I'm sorry, we're in Harrisburg. While we're waiting in the emergency room, there's a guy that is telling the triage person at the front, listen, I do not feel well. I think I'm having a heart attack. I need to be seen. He said I think he was like a former doctor, or he had some sort of medical background, and he said I'm pretty sure I'm having a heart attack. And they said, sir, I apologize. You're going to have to wait. And the legislator that I was there with, who I had talked to him about the safe staffing bill, after he saw that, and after we got in the back, after he got settled, we were just talking about, we were waiting in the back, and he said, you know what, I'm going to co-sponsor your bill. He said, now I get it. Now I get it.
When you're dealing, I imagine we've talked about this, I think, before, but when you're understaffed, okay, I've heard in situations, you have, and by the nurses themselves, who are the life support of a hospital, that they've been forced to work not just in the ER but on floors where they're learning specific machines on the fly.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, they're smart people and they do a great job, but that's something that, and they're shouting from the highest mountain. It's funny because I'm looking at our agenda for today, and the Patient Safety Act has everything to do with the staffing. Okay, and that to me is such a important thing. You never think that when you're going to a hospital that they're going to be understaffed, and that that the nurse, who may be highly qualified, may be being put into a situation where they're operating a machine and learning on the fly. John, how much liability is in that type of situation? Because it seems like, those answers come from, those issues come from the top, from the people who are making the decisions to spend money. And then I ask, why aren't all hospitals nonprofit?
Well, when you have a corporation that's run they all claim that they're concerned about safety. When you ask someone a question at a deposition and they're sworn under oath, and I ask about safety, and everybody claims that safety is the number one priority, whether it's in a hospital or a job site, you name it, safety is number one on my list. And in reality, if safety was really number one on your list in a hospital, and you're running a hospital and you're in risk management, or whatever, you're sitting on a board and you discuss staffing issues, and this applies to nursing homes and so forth, we all get it. It's hard to fill these positions, and the reality is a lot of times you just can't get enough people to work, like, let's say, in a nursing home. I don't know if that really applies in a hospital setting, other than you have a situation where everyone who works in a hospital will tell you why they're having difficulties staffing an ER, and they're fixable problems. These are flat out fixable problems. A lot of times you can't tell the University of Pennsylvania, which has got it's probably one of the busiest hospitals in the country. I mean, when we're trying to get over there in a morning on a rush hour, when you got the outpatient procedures and everything, it's like trying to get into a stadium, getting off there at the South Street exit to get over to Civic Center Boulevard. All the parking garages are full. I mean, it is a very busy place. So it's not for lack of business.
This is exactly right.
It's a corporation. I don't want to call hospitals corporations, but these are systemic problems, and that falls on the responsibility of the people that run the place. Well, so that's where the liability lies. It lies with the university, and I'm not pointing out the University of Pennsylvania. I'm staring west from my office, so I'm looking in that direction. But it applies to all hospitals, all of them.
John, the motive for opening up a hospital when you're dealing with people who are focused on profits. I'd like to segue, if it's cool, on one of the bills that you co-sponsored, the Protecting Hospital Workers from Workplace Violence.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that, if you will, Tarik.
Yeah. This one is close to my heart. What I can tell you that I'm wearing a brace right now on my knee because I was attacked when I was working at the health center 5 years, more than 5 years ago, and I've been attacked several times actually, and in working in various settings. And healthcare providers, whether they be a doctor, nurse, nurse's aide, nurse practitioner, respiratory therapist, they really truly are on the front lines of our society. And when they are being physically attacked, they're injured, and a lot of times they can't go back to work because of the level of their injury. And you know this, John, you've seen this, I'm sure. And so what we're trying to do is, instead of doing things that we know don't work, making the penalties more severe. Like as someone that's about to commit a crime, you're really going to say, well, instead of getting 10 years in prison, I'm going to get 20, so I'm not going to do it. They don't think like that. Usually things, but what we know work are evidence-based interventions, money that helps to work with de-escalation, security, to help hospitals figure out what they can do to make things safer for workers so that they're less likely to be attacked, including video camera security, things like that, any way that we can help de-escalate. So this would this would be a fund that would be administered through the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where hospitals would be able to apply for security enhancements to protect their workers. And I actually worked with a physician who texted me earlier today, I think wanting to know where the status of the bill is.
I was going to ask you, that's it. Yeah. Where is this? The co-sponsorship memo is out. I'm actually working on it with Dr. Arvind Venkat, who's a physician, and Bridget Kozarowski, and a few other reps as well. And so my hope is that we can get this into the budget through appropriation. So I'm actually, I've been very blessed to be put on the appropriations committee. So I'm working with appropriations to see if we can get this in the budget so we can get some funding and really help also give these workers some peace of mind. Let me ID the show real quick. You're listening to the Legal and Labor Special. We're sponsored by Sullivan Zervanos. John Zervanos is our host. Of course, we have Representative Tarik Khan, who is our guest on the broadcast today, talking everything healthcare and some important bills that are on the table that the representative has co-signed or authored on his own. But having said that, when I think about workplace violence and places that, hospitals, you would think, okay, I know a number of nurses who have been, and who the conditions are tough. You're working with big people. I mean, I have a great friend of mine who was trying to get a patient, out of up of a chair. The patient got violent, pushed her, and she went down. She's injured for life.
Yeah.
Okay? You think people know, and I think the owners of hospitals, are they investing in the patient safety? I mean, the nursing safety, the staff safety. What is the sentiment from up top when it comes to this? Because, by the way, another situation where workers' compensation, their rates are going to go through the roof. You're going to pay either way. Why not do it the right way and protect your staff, your nurses, and also not have your workers' compensation rates go through the ceiling?
Yeah. I can't speak for hospitals in terms of what they prioritize, but what I can tell you that as a legislator, there are so many pressing issues. There are so many bills. There's like 1,000. There are thousands and thousands of bills. I think last session we were up to like 2,800. There are so many things that are jockeying for your attention. But one thing that gets attention is when there's money available, and also it's sort of a matching program. So the hospitals, they're not just we're not just going to fund it fully from the state. We're going to offer them some money, but they have to match it, and to an extent so that they can get that, and it has to be used for security enhancements. So this is one of those ways that we can sort of help, sort of like a behavioral modification, like to sort of give them the incentive to want to behavioral economics to want to help their employees, to make sure that they are doing everything that they can to make things safer.
John, any thoughts on that in particular?
Well, I'm gonna go back a little bit, and I just wanted to kind of I put out this question. Remember when I talked about it's a win-win with this Patient Safety Act by kind of establishing safety staffing standards. And if I understood you correctly, you had indicated that you're getting resistance from the Hospital Association and that lobbying group that lobbies on behalf of hospitals. And then you said, well, but I'm getting support. You had mentioned, and again, we keep talking about the University of Pennsylvania by default, I guess, and it's a wonderful institution and respected nationally and internationally for the medical care that they've been able to provide and achieve for their patients. But I think you said that someone from the University of Pennsylvania actually said, yeah, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay.
They're good.
You got a major university in Philly that's for it. And I would assume that might apply to other urban centers. Where is the resistance coming from, who are giving you a problem for sponsoring a bill? I think I just lost everybody. Am I there?
Yeah, no, we got you. Hello? Yeah, I'm with you.
Right.
Yeah.
My screen just went blank, but
I got all that.
Where's the resistance coming? Yeah,
it's the Pennsylvania Medical Society. They represent. I'm sorry. We're sorry. American Hospital Association. It's American Hospital Association. So I keep saying it's the so it's the American Hospital Association, and then it's the Pennsylvania Hospital Association, which is the local, and they're fighting it. And I think what we've been trying to do is make the cases that this bill is actually going to save you from having nurses burn out, having to rehire nurses, nurses going out because they're injured, patients, falling, tripping. The hospitals actually, they don't get reimbursed if a patient falls. They have to actually take care of that. It's not like Medicare is like, yeah, we'll take care of that too if they fall. That's on as you know, that's on the hospital. And so we really think that.
How about the most obvious reason? You're going to prevent malpractice lawsuits, which most hospitals, particularly in urban centers, are complaining about verdicts being too high and they can't afford to stay in business. Well, I get all of the economics. What I want to know is why in God's name would you not want to be for a bill that could prevent all of that?
Exactly.
I don't get it. I just don't get it.
I don't either. It would save them money. Yeah.
Then we're both.
And the thing is, they keep saying, oh, we don't have enough nurses. We're short on workers. The truth is, the truth is that we have the same number of nurses. The nurses are keeping their license. The nurses that are licensed as a registered nurse like myself, they're continuing to renew their license. We have the same nurses coming out of the nursing schools. They're still, and also the number one landing spot for a nurse coming out of nursing schools is where? The hospital. Why? Because they get trained. You get the best training. As a young person, do you want to be working in home care? Do you want to work in a nursing home, or do you want to work in a hospital where it's you get the training? There's a social aspect. A lot of kids, I think, when they're growing up, they think they want to go into healthcare. They see themselves in a hospital. It's the number one landing spot still for nurses. The problem is when you're working in a toxic environment, you don't want to stay.
Well, it's interesting when and I'm getting a picture in the fact that when you have a shortage of nurses staff, okay, you create a situation, I assume, where people, okay, I don't want to be there because it's an archaic situation, and we're overworked, obviously, and undermanned, and the environment, we're talking about Penn and how they staff real well.
Yeah.
And they're like you said earlier, you have nurses that are willing to stay later because they're not so taxed from being, having to handle, large patient ratios. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that make sense? And is that?
Yeah. And I would say with Penn, they're on the right side of the policy. I think where the rubber meets the road, listen, there are certain things that you need to be told what to do. And I tell you as a nurse, there are certain things like, your continuing education. If they didn't tell me I had to do it, I probably wouldn't do the 30 hours every, that you have to do, the ABCD and like all that stuff. I probably wouldn't do it if I didn't have to. But because they say you have to do it, I do it, and I'm a better nurse because of it. And it's the same thing with hospitals. Sometimes you have to just tell them what they can and can't do. I don't know if either of you have kids, nephews, or nieces, but sometimes you have to tell a child what they can and can't do. Okay? It's just because if you don't tell them, they're going to get away with whatever they want. And again, there's a lot of things going on. So sometimes you have to say, okay, what am I supposed to do? What can I do? So that's why. And not, yeah.
And so let's segue. I mean, I want to go to
sure.
3 areas of legislation because
Yeah.
they seem to overlap. Modernization of professional nursing law.
Yeah. So this is a great bill, and this is again, the safe staffing bill is bipartisan. We have Democrats and Republicans. This is another one that's very bipartisan. This basically allows nurse practitioners like myself, who have been trained to practice to the level of a nurse practitioner where you can prescribe, order tests. It removes artificial barriers that certain states have on their records because of old legislation. When the nursing law was written, initially years ago, they didn't have nurse practitioners. And as a result, we have very arcane laws. Now, most of the states have actually fixed it. And a lot of our neighboring states have fixed it. And the reason why it's a problem, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is that we're less competitive as a state in Pennsylvania because guess what? Once you become a nurse practitioner, a lot of these nurse practitioners are leaving because they know they can practice to the full extent of their practice. They can open up their own place without having to spend tens of thousands of dollars to have a co-signing physician. And having a co-signing physician is basically having a physician sign a piece of paper. There's nothing that says that the physician has to be there with you, that they have to see the patient. They have to sign a piece of paper. And you have to have, it's what I call a collaborative agreement. And for the privilege of that, sometimes nurse practitioners have to pay up to $15,000 a year to the physician for the piece of paper. And that is what the law says, that you have to have a piece of paper. It's called a collaborative agreement with a physician. Most of the states, again, have outlawed it. We have not done that yet in Pennsylvania. And that's what that bill does. And it's bipartisan.
What's interesting, when you say bipartisan, you're talking about it's been authored by Democrats and Republicans?
I worked on it. I introduced it with in the Senate, the main co-prime sponsor is Cameron Bartolotta, who's a Republican out of Greene County from the West. And in the House, I believe it's I believe it's let me not say I'm pretty sure I know the rep, but it's a Republican rep. I don't want to mix up the bill, so I don't want to name the wrong rep. But I introduced it with Representative Nancy Gens, who's the lead sponsor, and I'm a co-prime sponsor. So me, her, and I think it's Jeremy Schaefer. And he's a Republican. All three of us have introduced that bill together, with Gens being the top name on that list.
You know, it's funny when you talk about it. So I'm looking at the bill. Representative Nancy Gens, Representative Ryan Warner, and
Warner. Sorry, it's Warner. It's Warner.
Yep. It's funny. I get it, and I'm being sarcastic when I say it. I get a kick out of when you talk about, when we're talking about profits, and also a Democrat and Republican when you're talking about healthcare, right? And the reason I say that is there's no other place in the world where if you're sick, okay, and you talk about some of the lobbies that are going against some of this, going against some of this common sense legislation. But I wonder sometimes if you got a family member, okay, and imagine you're a member of that organization. What do you do? What do you do? Like you live in an area where there's a hospital, okay? You are, for example, and a lot of bipartisan stuff. So, and in labor, as you know, we need bipartisan.
Right, bipartisan. Yep.
I'm not trying to get, but
yep.
Imagine you're in that situation and your loved one has a heart attack, and you're taking him to the hospital, and you've been fighting against legislation to properly staff hospitals. Okay, is there an irony about that? And I guess what I'm saying is common sense, legislation like the bills that you're co-sponsoring and sponsoring are, they're part of our daily life fabric. In other words, who would ever think there's a labor shortage at a hospital when your loved one or your child is going there? That shouldn't there be? You talk about legislation, okay? Shouldn't there be standards in regards to who can own a house? Like I look at what happened in Hanneman, right?
Yes.
I mean, you care more about the real estate than you. I mean, should there be requirements? Talk about that.
Yeah, thanks. It was one of the reasons why I ran was because of Hanneman, and I wanted to do something about it. So this session, I introduced, along with Lisa Borowski, a bill that if there is a hospital that's going to be acquired, the Attorney General will have the authority to thumbs down the acquisition if it is not in the interest of the community. So a Hanneman situation would be a prime example of that. How that happened, how that went through, is a travesty. And because they basically, as you mentioned, they separated the institution of the hospital from the land, so they could declare bankruptcy on the institution, but they could sell the land as a real estate transaction, which is like, and if that happens, forget about it. I mean, if they will do that all over the country, because these hospitals who have been there for years, Hanneman, 171-year institution, had been on that for, I don't know, since the 30s. That institution, that the value of that land, 76 is right there. Broad Street's right there. It is like a driveway coming off of 76, which is a shame because when they closed that ER, instead of patients being able to get instant treatment, again, these are all about patient access. So that is the bill that we've introduced, and that was really on the heels of Hanneman. That we were able to work on that. So it's Representative Borowski, Representative Paul Takak, and myself.
And anybody, by the way, who's been in Hanneman Hospital ER, okay? My God, like what really, like John, you were talking about a lot of these ERs and being understaffed. Let's look at both of the situations now. Now we have a shortage. In some situations, you may have a shortage of staff, of nurses and doctors, okay? And now we're short at one of the busiest emergency rooms in the city of Philadelphia. A travesty. We had a lot of the union leaders down at on the picket line doing all kinds of presentations of why that hospital should not. Somebody should have stepped in if it was possible, but God knows how many lives have been impacted because that busy emergency room is no longer there. Combine those two issues. By the way, where are we with that, Tarik? With that legislation in regards to? I mean, is that passed? In other words, what you're talking about doing, what the Attorney General happened to give it the thumbs up or down, is that now a requirement or where?
No, we're working on it. I was very blessed. Last session, I got 7 of my bills signed into law. Unfortunately, this wasn't one of them. But I actually worked with Lisa Browski on it. This one, I had a different version of the bill. She had a better version, and she let me come on her version this year when we introduced it together.
Hold on. I find that hard to believe that her version was better than
it was.
Wait a minute. My state rep, no chance.
Well, your state rep is smart enough to, when he sees a better piece of legislation, to get on that and get rid of the old one. So
we only have a few minutes left, and did we cover all three of
we did. There's a couple of things. If I have maybe 30 seconds, I can give you a quick plug.
Sure, take your time.
Last session, I'm really proud. I worked with Jen O'Mara to pass a bill for post-traumatic stress injury for cops and firefighters. And John, you'll probably appreciate this. The cops and firefighters, PTSI is not covered under workman's comp. And so, all the things that our police and fire, they see on a daily basis, not covered under workman's comp for PTSI, post-traumatic stress injury. We got that signed into law. I worked on with Jen, and so that was a huge win for our cops and firefighters and first responders. And then also today, I with Ronnie Green, who unfortunately is under the weather. She's actually getting treatment now. But it's basically would force schools and it would give them the money to get the lead out of the water. Because right now, Pennsylvania, the last report had an F in terms of getting the lead out of the schools. And so we did it in Philly, though. Philadelphia, Philly Public Schools work with Penn Environment, the unions, and they got these water filtration systems to filter out the lead. So even though me and you went to St. Bridget's, well, they probably had lead in those water fountains too. John, I don't know where you went, but we all got it.
But that's why everybody at our school is like 5'6" and under. Sorry.
But that's a bill that we talked about in the policy committee. The last bill, which I think is really going to have an effect on health, is the minimum wage bill. Right now, Pennsylvania, $7.25 is minimum wage. Ridiculous. Hasn't been changed since the Obama administration. That was the first year of the Obama administration. It's ridiculous, especially now with how much people have to pay and the high costs. So we got to raise it to at least $15. We want a COLA so that, when inflation goes up, the minimum wage goes up. We also want preemption. So if Philly wants to do a higher one, they want to do $18, $19 for minimum wage, they can do it. Right now it's illegal, and we want to change that.
Well, I mean, I've had many conversations.
That's all good stuff, man. That's all really good stuff.
It is.
Thank you.
It is. And by the way, that ancient, minimum wage. Think about that. 40 hours, what's it, 725?
725. It's what I made. I lived in LA. In 2005. It was making minimum wage. 2001, 2002, working at Starbucks, making $7.10 because California had a higher minimum wage. Right now it's 725, 15 years later in Philly.
It's imagine that. So 725 times 40, 280,
Yep.
I mean, you're talking about $290.
That's right. And you know what the average rent from what I heard on apartments.com in Pennsylvania, the average rent $1,700. So you basically need, you can't even do it on one. Just paying rent. You need 2 full-time jobs making minimum wage just to be able to make rent. But also, I'll tell you, when I did that in LA, I was making $7.25 at Starbucks. It was about 7:15, I was working as many hours as I could get, and my rent was only $500. By the way, some months I had to ask my mom or dad or my brother to send me a check for $100 because I couldn't make rent.
Where are we with before we go? Where are we with the minimum wage bill? And I mean, because we've been, I mean, labor's been one thing about great about labor is we're working on issues that don't even affect us. Obviously,
Yep. Yeah. Yes.
we're
Because you
trying
make
to
more than the minimum wage.
sure.
And
So,
labor's been a huge. Again, I'm blessed to be on appropriations. I hope that and it's Ronnie Green. She's the lead sponsor of this bill. I'm a co-prime sponsor with her. Our goal is to get this in the budget. Governor Shapiro had it in his budget. We want to get this in the budget. We want to get this over the finish line. Again, and at least we need a COLA or we need preemption as part of it.
so before we go, John Zervanos, parting words, sir.
I can't thank State Rep enough for all the efforts because everything he's doing is good stuff. That's all I have to say. And if 75% of what he's proposing gets achieved,
yeah,
we're gonna be a better state.
No question about it. Well, here's the way it's going to roll. If the state rep gets that stuff all through, okay, when Josh Shapiro becomes president, we're looking at the new governor. We're fast tracking him right here. So, but listen,
2028, man. That's
the confidence. Thank you.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So having said that, for Tarik, we want to thank you so much for being on the program. Always a pleasure. So proud to have you as my state rep.
Thank you.
Representing all the Fallsers. And of course the work you're doing in Harrisburg, making a difference in the lives of people. That's the beauty of it. Okay. And by the way, you talk about the PTSI bill.
Yeah.
Guess what? You're in the workers' comp and all that. Let me tell you something. You're helping individuals who have been, who've been on the job a long time without relief. And guess what? That's saving lives as well. So we appreciate everything you're doing. John Zervanos, really great show and appreciate you were adamant last month to get the representative. Said, listen, we got to get the representative back on for an hour. And we really appreciate it. So on behalf of Representative Tarik Khan and our host, John Zervanos, I want to thank everybody for listening to our Legal and Labor special here on WWDB Talk 860, sponsored by Soloff and Zervanos. I'm Joe Doherty. Thanks for listening, everybody.